Yesterday we covered what goes into a scouting report. Today I'm going to cover my method at least as to how you prepare for draft for a best of 5 series. Now this is an inside look as to how a coach or a professional team might approach the drafting phase at a tournament like the 2020 League of Legends World Championship. Now the first step that anybody has to do as following these things and out of war, you have to know yourself and then know the enemy, is to know what tools that you have. You want to make sure that the strategies that you are going to be thinking about later are things that your team knows how to play. So you have to determine what your weapons of choice are, and I've listed on screen at the moment 3 different types of strategies that have been played in the tournament. So the first is what Suning has played quite a fair bit, and most of the LPL teams are pretty decent at doing, where what you want to do is pick a farming jungler, and the objective of going for that is to snowball them ahead in the early game using multiple pushing lanes and stack drakes, hopefully going for a early soul to close out the game or frog your opponent on the soul point and the Baron to create a scenario that is almost impossible to defend. Another possible approach to this is playing for a 1-3-1 split push strategy, where you go for the likes of Camille TF, which is something that both the LCK teams and the likes of TS as well as JD Gaming both are capable of doing. And the third is to go for a scaling team fighting strategy, of which we have seen a Enchanter support variant coming up from TS itself. Within the strategies that you have, you can further classify them based off your understanding of how you're going to piece these drops together and what your players' champion pools are. To say this is something that we can do on blue side, where on blue side what you tend to have is a compositional draft, which would be more suited towards, say, the leftmost one that you're seeing, where you are just drafting, say, going for a first pick Graves or Lilia, and then piecing these champions that you pick them, and you're always going to do and achieve what they have, right? Like you can go for the Zoe, is a decent blind pick. You can go for a Volibear or Renekton with a Volibear brand that's going to guarantee you the lane push and be able to execute the strategy kind of regardless of the counter picks that your opponents can bring to the table. Whereas for a strategy like the Camille to Suffolk strategy, is something that might benefit you a little bit more on the red side, where you are able to make the counter picks in the solo lanes, where you can pick a solo laner on R3, ban out 2 champions, and then counter pick the other solo laner on R5 as well. And the last one that we see is something that can be played on either side. It's just a question of where you want the to be picking your champions accordingly, and do you show the support at which point. The second thing that you need to do is determine the draft logic. So this is where you dig up your opponent's map pick history. You can look as far back as 5 games or 10 games, but this is just looking from the group stage itself. So if we are preparing for Gen G in this case, right, we look at the way that they have been drafting, and we see that there's a very high priority on going for the likes of Lucian and Set on B1 when they're on blue side. So I'm going to be preparing a red side strategy against Gen G, and then we see them go for AD champion, and then they pair with AP junglers, even going for the likes of a Gragas in one of the games, to play towards the mid and top side of the map. Now, things to note for is the presence of flex picks such as the Set, which they have shown, and the Volibear, which they can play in both the top and jungle positions. While it's unlikely that it goes to the jungle, this is what we think Gen G is going to be doing, and we see over here they are going to be playing using a bot that can push out, contribute towards the jungle, and then the jungle is going to be playing for the mid lane and top lane. Now, while you can jump to straight away a stylistic answer towards this, you still want to go through the process of doing a draft for each strategy that you have, and then developing what's the most likely response, where you look at it and you just assume that you're always going to go for first pick Lucian, and then followed by jungle and AD carry, and then filling in the support on 5, where you can just simply copy paste what they have drafted so far and then match it to what you might be drafting against them. So this doesn't allow them to pick new champions. This doesn't allow them to kind of innovate and shift their draft around and change the logic of their existing draft. The second is you develop a worst case scenario where you look at the way that they have been playing, and then you now allow them to develop specific counter picks. So if you're going to be snatching Renekton away, and even if they haven't shown Quinn in the past, you want to insert scenarios where they play Quinn, or they go for Ornn and they have a slight shift in strategy. And the third is what you do is you ignore the draft logic that's present at the moment, and based off your scouting of this team, you present their strategy B. So say that they so Genji, their B strategy has to play the likes of Senna Azir quite a fair bit, and they tend to do that as the right side draft. So what you want to do is generate a scenario where, say, you have banned out the likes of Lucian and Sett. So they come first pick an AD mid laner in this case, and they default to their B strategy, which is pulling out the Senna and Azir. What is the draft going to look like if they're going to prioritize the same blind picks, but this time go for the draft on the blue side instead? And once you've done this, you will be able to determine what the key breakpoints in the game. So let's say you're going to be drafting a scaling team fighting composition. Then you need to know that you will have to be able to defend the dive at about 315, where mid will be able to get push, and rotate on the top side of the map, so that your top laner can stay relevant in the game. And based on these key breakpoints, you would then be able to explore champions that can be used to innovate solutions. So this can be either in the top lane where you feel that, okay, Poppy might be a very good champion here, or Shen might be a good champion here because they're more difficult to dive, they're tankier, and then you need to go for a jungler or mid laner that can stop the mid laner from rotating outwards, so that at most is only a 2-man dive on the top side of the map, which these tankier champions would then be able to defend. And once you have established these things, you then establish and prioritize your laundry list of things that need to be practiced and things that need to be worked on in order for such a strategy to work. And that kind of wraps it up as to how a team can approach the best of 5 series. And this usually tends to be a very long process because you have to generate so many different iterations of what your opponents might be drafting. Then you go through what the worst case scenario is. Then you try to figure out, okay, this is what we might be working on. And then you have to do it for each potential strategy that you have. Do it for red side, do it for blue side. And then once you've done that, you will have a very good idea of what are the things that you immediately need to pick up and the solutions they need to find in order to beat this team, or perhaps get a draft advantage again against them in a best of 5. Now that kind of wraps it up for today's video. This was Jensen presenting you to this content. If you like this type of content, please do give this video a like and consider subscribing to my channel. Have a nice day and get hyped for Worlds.